Recently, I did a live stream where I read your scary stories live. During that live stream, I asked if you guys had any creepy and allegedly true encounters with skinwalkers, and you guys really delivered. These stories were sent in during that live stream, and these were the best ones that creeped me out the most. I think you'll enjoy them just as much as I enjoyed them. If you have a story that you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this show going. Now, without further ado, let's get into these allegedly true, creepy encounters with alleged skinwalker creatures. I'm going to start out by saying I absolutely love your content. I listen to you at work and when I go to bed. Anyway, let's get into it. I have two stories. These aren't my personal encounters, but my mom's encounters with what she believes to have been skinwalkers. Let me start off by saying that we've been Christians all our lives. We do believe in demons and spirits, but don't really like to talk about them. This happened when she was a little girl. My mom and her family lived on the Navajo reservation in a little area called Red Mesa, just east of Shiprock, New Mexico. Her dad's side of the family was traditional, and her mom's side was Christian. One night, her parents were going to a peyote meeting about 20 minutes away from their hogan. Her parents said that they wouldn't be back till the next morning, as the meetings lasted most of the night. So my mom and her 3 siblings got into bed. About 40 minutes after they left, she started to hear noises outside of the hogan. It sounded like rocks were being thrown at the hogan. As the minutes passed, the noises got louder. Then, all of a sudden, she saw what looked like a giant wolf. But the wolf was massive in size and had big, red glowing eyes. It started to scratch at the window, then started walking around the hogan. My mom was the only one awake at the time. She grabbed the blanket and covered her siblings, hoping that this grotesque beast could not see them. She was trying to pretend to be asleep, but was watching the giant beast the entire time. After just a little while, the noises seemed to stop. The next morning, my mom's parents came back. They went outside to find huge paw-like prints all over and around the hogan. They never owned dogs or any pets at that time. My mom truly believes what she saw was a skinwalker that night. This second encounter took place about a year or two later. Before my mom's family went to bed each night, they would all go to the outhouse because the outhouse was about 50 yards from the hogan, and they didn't want to go during the night. One night, my mom's uncle went with my mom and her siblings to the outhouse. After they finished, they were just about to walk back when the youngest of the siblings, which was about 7 at the time, said, "Look!" They all looked at the top of the hill, about 50 yards away. On the hill appeared to be a giant wolf-looking creature. As they all looked, the creature stood up on its hind legs. It appeared to be a massive 9-foot-tall creature. My mom's uncle yelled and told my mom and siblings to run to the hogan. As they got to the hogan, her uncle grabbed his hunting rifle and ran back outside. They heard 2 gunshots, and then everything went quiet. Her uncle came back in and tried to calm her and her siblings down. My mom, her siblings, and uncle all believed they saw a skinwalker that night. Hello, Swamp Dweller. For the sake of the story, I'll just call myself Steve. My story isn't really creepy, but I want to know if anyone out there might know what I saw. Just for a little bit of background for my encounter. I grew up and currently live in the middle of Maine. In the part of the woods that I live in, we don't have any stray or wild dogs, and that's for later on in this story. I am a 19-year-old male, and I enjoy hunting and fishing with my older brother. He lives about 10 minutes from me, and on the way to his house, there are a few small fields. I don't know if this has anything to do with what I saw. Anyway, I got out of work Friday at about 10:30 p.m. and decided to go to my brother's house for the weekend and maybe fish a nearby stream in the morning. On my way to his house, I came upon the first field and saw nothing. Now comes the weird part. Coming up to the second field, there was this thing right in the middle of the road. It looked like one of those farm dogs at first, only this one had long white hair and a little longer snout. It was already sitting there in the middle of the road facing me. I would say it was looking at me, but I couldn't see any reflection in its eyes from my headlights. I swerved a little so I wouldn't hit the dog, and I noticed that it didn't even flinch, not even an inch. It just moved its head to keep facing me, and before I knew it, it was over. I'm sorry if this encounter was poorly written, but I'm curious as to know what you guys think I saw that night. I didn't think skinwalkers or wendigos or any sort of shapeshifters lived in Maine, especially around the middle of it. What freaks me out the most is I've had tons of nightmares about this after. I'm not entirely sure what I encountered that night. When I hear tales of cryptids, wendigo, skinwalkers, etc., I understand why witnesses say they may have been very freaked out, even terrified, because I've also encountered something that terrified me. Whatever this thing was that I encountered 17 years ago is far more terrifying than any cryptid or anything that I think anybody has ever witnessed. I can't exactly say if it's a skinwalker or not, but here's what happened. Long story short, I was chilling with a friend having a good night, and together we were both drawn to look up at the ceiling. To give you an idea of my friend's place, it was a bottom floor flat and a block of flats several stories high. My friend then creeped me out by explaining we were drawn to look up as someone above us was messing with a Ouija board, and in their words, something was now, quote, on the loose. Now at this point, I already believed in the supernatural, but I was too young and stupid to really understand what I was doing. So I decided, despite my friend's protest against this, to go investigate and see what was in the stairwell. 2 steps out the door, and I look up the stairs, and what I saw is still burned into my memory. Even writing this, the fear is coming back and my hands are trembling. This is where it gets really scary and downright weird. I saw this thing as an image in my head, not with my eyes, and they were wide open. All I can say is this thing was huge, easily 8 feet tall. It was mad, and it felt like pure evil. I think I made it mad or something, because I felt like it wasn't very happy that I could see it, and when it caught me staring at it, it quickly turned to face me. It even felt like it was staring into my soul briefly before it suddenly charged at me while sort of screeching, sending me running. I just managed to get back in the flat as it took a swipe at me. It was that fast. Now, I said weird, so here comes the weird part. The reason I can't explain to people in any real detail about what it looked like or sounded like is that I have nothing to really compare it to, except its approximate height and that it had eyes, because I know it saw me for sure. For example, if you have ever seen a strange animal, or even a cryptid, you at least have something to somewhat compare it to. You can say it sounded like a bear, a deer, or a wolf, or whatever. You at least have something to compare it to. But this I have nothing. It's like nothing I've ever witnessed. No mammal, bird, reptile, or insect. I'm a fan of nature programs and the natural world in general, and I'm telling you, I've never seen anything compare with it. Believe me or not, it's up to you. But I know pure evil exists, and I'll never forget what it looks like and sounds like. This was 17 years ago, and it still feels as if it happened yesterday. I'm a 17-year-old female, and I have had a recent experience with what I believe to be a Skinwalker. I live in northern Ontario in Canada, and I moved into a cozy little home in the woods with my family when I was 10. This forest has lots of man-made trails because it used to be a small zoo, but the man who owned it passed away, and his wife sold the property. Anyway, back to the story. I've always loved being here, and I take a walk in the woods on the trails every night around 7 p.m. I've always felt very comfortable in these woods, but this recent experience has me chilled to the bone, and I don't plan on walking alone in those woods anytime soon. So, I was walking in the forest, and suddenly, I just had this off feeling, like something was staring at me from afar. That feeling of being watched that you hear about so often. So, with this eerie feeling, I decided to pick up my pace and speed walk back to the house. But things only continued to get more weird from there. As I turned onto the main trail, the forest seemed to fall completely silent. There was not a single sound, not a peep to be heard. Even the wind seemed to come to a halt. Now, I was really freaking out at this point, and decided to make a run for it. All of a sudden, I started smelling this foul scent, something that reminded me of rotting flesh and sewage. As I was gagging on the air, I heard this piercing howl, or maybe even a scream. I don't know exactly what I heard. It was like a wolf's howl, and an injured man's scream at the same time. It seemed to be very close, so I was full-on sprinting at this point, and very, very close to the house, when a wolf jumps right in my path. This wolf, though, it seemed off and very disfigured. Its fur was pitch black, and it was about the size of a moose. Then, it turned to look at me. It had deer horns, and its face seemed to be almost human, with reflective yellow eyes. I screamed, and for whatever reason, it ran off into the forest. But the way it walked was just weird, like how a dog in ice skates would walk. Its legs seemed to wiggle like spaghetti noodles, and it had no tail. I don't know what this thing was, but I hope I never see it again. I really hope somebody in the chat, down in the comments, can let me know what you think this thing is. I looked it up and I saw Wendigo, I saw Skinwalker. Those things make sense, but I'd love to get more insight. This happened to me only a few weeks ago, and to this day, it still feels so real. A few weeks ago, I had to do some laundry. I messaged my friend to let him know I was on my way to his house to do my laundry, seeing how I lived in an apartment complex without a washer-dryer setup. But sadly, he messaged me back saying that his washer was having problems draining. Crap, I thought. The closest laundromat was 3 miles away, and I don't have a car. That said, I don't mind the walk there since I walk everywhere. The only thing is I was concerned about it getting very dark due to it being winter. So I gather my things and gear up with some warm clothes since the weather was going to be very cold. I was halfway there, and I forgot my flashlight since some of the roads don't have streetlights on them, and I didn't want a car to accidentally hit me due to not seeing me clearly. But I just figured I'd use my flashlight on my phone on the way home. I get done with my laundry and started on my way home. Of course, once I left, it was getting very dark. Now you might be wondering why I didn't have a friend pick me up. Well, I normally would, but he was at work and my other friends were busy. But anyway, I started my way home, and in order to get home, I had to walk down a street with a dense forest on each side. This specific street was one with no street lights, so I took my phone out and noticed that my phone was on 12%. Well, hopefully this gets me to the street with a light, 'cause I'm gonna be spooked, I said to myself half out loud. That's when I heard it. I heard what sounded like a giggle and a slight wheeze followed by someone, or something, saying, "Lights won't save you." I soiled myself when I saw this thing move from behind the tree. It had to be at least 8 feet tall and stood on 2 legs. It repeated the strange laugh and walked away. I stood there in shock, but snapped out of it when I heard a car driving towards me. I was thankful for that car, since I took the opportunity to run home. I believe what I saw was a Wendigo or a Skinwalker. If anyone can give me some answers, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for sharing my story. So first off, I would like to say this is 100% true. Now, weirdly, while this whole story involves myself, I didn't actually witness anything. So, some pretext. I have been vacationing at private campgrounds my whole life. My family owns property in the Mohawk Trails, not too terribly far from Heath, Massachusetts. Absolutely gorgeous land, and historic property. Everywhere you go, you can see beautiful stone structures and property lines dating all the way back to the time of the Mohawk Indians. Like I said, I've been camping there my entire life, and I still go there every once in a while. Nothing has ever really happened, paranormal at least, till this time. Go back for about 5 years. My brother still calls this my quote-unquote Skinwalker story, although I'm not totally convinced. It is weird though. So 5 years ago, my brother, my 2 cousins, and myself were camping for a weekend. Very calm and a peaceful weekend, if I'm honest. I was at a private lake fishing off the dock, not catching anything too good. I caught a pickerel and tossed it into the woods. I continued fishing. Suddenly, I hear my name being called, coming from the right side of the dock, a good distance away. Now, where the dock was set up, if I looked to the right, I could see an expanse of land that wraps around the lake. But there were trees and shrubs blocking my view of the path. There was a voice coming from that direction. I recognized it as my little brother, so I called back to him telling them I was on the dock. I see him around the corner stare at me bewildered. He looks back into the woods and back at me, so I ask him, "What's up?" "Were you just in the woods? Like, running through the woods?" He looked absolutely baffled, to be honest. I really don't know how to describe the look on his face. "No," I said. "How could I be in there and back here so quickly?" I replied. He looked back in, and then back at me again, and says, "Dude, I just saw you there. But you were running that way." He points back in the direction he came from. But I couldn't hear twigs snapping or leaves rustling. "That's the weird part," he said. And mind you, back then I was around 290 pounds. I was a rather big guy, I guess. I'm now down to 210, and even am in the military, proud to say, but that's beside the point. Now, remember how I said I threw a fish in the woods. I then realized I could no longer hear it flopping around anymore. I threw it in 5 minutes prior, so I go to look for it. It's gone. I searched for it in a 30-foot radius, and it's just absolutely gone. There was no sign of animal life coming through and grabbing it. So, that was very odd, and till this day my brother tells the story. But then, that same day my mother comes up to me at our campsite and says, "Josh, did you go into the female shower room at the rec hall?" Obviously I didn't, but she was upset. I say, no, are you insane? Why would I go in there? Apparently she was trying to find an explanation, because I found out a few days later she followed what she thought was me into the shower room, and this figure was nowhere to be seen. And lastly, something not involving me. My two cousins were from different sides of the family, and they didn't even really know each other all that well. So the last night we were there, my cousin, who is a female, we can call her Carrie, wakes up in bed, and the sun is beginning to rise. She turns over and sees my other cousin, who we will call Jose, sitting in a chair and listening to headphones, staring out the window. So she turns back over to try and fall asleep. She can't. She feels uncomfortable since they don't know each other, so she turns back and he's completely gone. Later on, it turned out he had never even left his bed. He was still asleep. Hello everyone. I'm looking to get some help in finding out what I saw while hiking in one of my local national forests not that long ago. I think this happened roughly about a month ago if I'm remembering correctly. I was hiking off trail during the day, enjoying the nice spring weather, listening to the wind blow through the trees, birds chirping, squirrels running across the bark, jumping from limb to limb. As I ventured deeper into the beautiful forest, off trail of course, everything seemed to stop. Like, everything was quiet, complete silence. No more birds, no more squirrels. I know silence in the woods is no bueno. So I start to examine my surroundings. As I do this, I get the feeling I am being watched, goosebumps from head to toe. Then I see it. I wish I could say more than that, but it is the only thing that I can say for this thing. I have no better name for what I saw. It was about 50 yards out on a ridge staring at me. It was humanoid, but its skin was a light gray pigment. It had these long arms with claw-like hands. The size, oh god, it had to be at least 8 feet tall. It stood there just staring at me. I was frozen with fear. I felt like I was what's next on the menu. Finally, after a few moments, that honestly felt like eternities, without taking my eye off of this creature, I drew my pistol. Honestly, I never hike alone without one. I fired it into the air. When I did this, it retreated at a speed I have never seen from any living creature. I sat there for a good 30 minutes, pistol in hand, listening and scanning the environment. Finally, over time, the birds started chirping again. The squirrels were back out, and everything seemed to be normal again. I left and never looked back. A part of me wanted to go on the ridge and see its tracks, but I felt if I went in its direction, I wouldn't have returned. Never again will I go hiking in that forest. Maybe I'll drive through it. Maybe not. Even thinking of this story gives me an evil feeling, like the monster knows I'm there and it's watching me. Does anyone possibly know what I could have seen? First of all, I know a lot of people will think that this is a hoax because it is in Scotland, but I don't know how to explain this. I'm extremely familiar with Wendigos, Skinwalkers, Flushgates, all that kind of stuff, and there is probably a non-Native American possibility that I'm unaware of. But the only explanation to me is a Skinwalker or something along these lines. I apologize for my use of Scots slang in advance. I am a teenager, I won't disclose age, and I go to a public high school in Perthshire, Scotland. It's mostly a rural area, with mostly towns, villages, and just houses dotting the landscape, although there are 2 major cities in my area. The high school I go to is in a medium-sized town, and for privacy reasons, I will not disclose its name. Not many people I know have had many paranormal encounters, if any, although a few people claim to have seen ghosts and whatnot. Anyways, on to my encounter. I live in a large house in the middle of a field with my family. It's not too far from the town that I go to school in, but I usually take the bus just in case because I'm lazy, to be honest. Sometimes me and my mates, let's call them E, J, and C, take a path through a nearby forest to come back to my place where we just play video games and that sort of stuff. This particular day, my parents were out of town, and we decided to drink a bit of booze that we had in the mini fridge in my room. I didn't do too much. I'm not much of a drinker, and beer is not really my thing. Not really C's either. E and J, however, they all went to town. It got really late, or rather early, and they decided to leave and head home. I said bye to them and headed up to my room to play some more games. About a half an hour later, I heard a loud banging on my door. It was J and E. I left them in, and they started panicking. C goes home a different way than them. He lives a bit closer to me than the others. E and J said that they were walking through the woods and they saw a tall, skinny-looking bloke pelting it towards them. They panicked and legged it back to my house. While the skinny fella gave chase, my mind went back to another friend, somewhat of a paranormal bluff, who told me about Wendigos and Skinwalkers. I called 999 and said that a prowler was lurking around our house, and I chased my mates back to my house. I gave the operator my address and they said they'd have a car or two come to my house in an hour and a half. Apparently there was a big traffic incident. In the meantime, she said, arm yourselves, lock all the doors and windows, and lock yourselves in a room. We did just that, grabbing knives from the kitchen and barricading ourselves inside my bedroom. After a while, we heard heavy footsteps around our house, and thinking it was the police, I peered out of the window. What I saw was so much worse. It was E. It looked exactly the same as her. I knew that she was sitting, crying in my room. I freaked out and it saw me. What the hell is that thing? Whatever the heck it was, it could speak and it sounded exactly like Jay. It was a Skinwalker, I know it was. I remember the description from my horror weird friend. It fit the description that my horror weirdo friend told me. It looked exactly like my friend, but sounded like my other friend. It must have been confused, and that made it scarier. We heard sirens and that thing ran off into the woods. We told the police officers everything, and they checked it out. The officers left, after saying the woods were clear, then muttered something about a stupid prank call. After they left, we heard an inhuman shriek, but still sort of human-like. We didn't sleep at all that night. I believe that what we saw was a Skinwalker. I hope to God Almighty that I never have to face that bloody thing again. However, if I do, I'll sure make a follow-up. Greetings, fellow swamp dwellers. My family and I are Native Americans from the Navajo tribe. We have a lot of strange and unexplainable things that go on. A lot of them involve Skinwalkers. This is one of the many stories that I will send in. This happened sometime around 4 months ago. My uncle Andre lives alone in a trailer park with his older brother David, who lives right next door to him. The night before this all happened, Andre was watching TV when he heard something. He said it sounded like someone running up and down his house. He stopped and listened to it for a good while. Before he texted my uncle David to look out at his house to see if he saw something. When David looked out, he said he saw something like a man or something running on Andre's house. David, being a fearless older brother, ran out just in time to see a black shadow jump 11, maybe even 13 feet or so off the ground. He followed it until he stopped at the tree line where he lost it. He had a flashlight with him and shined the light till he saw some reflecting eyes looking back at him. The figure looked like it was crouching down, trying to hide from David. He then heard a sound to his side. For a second he looked toward the sound before snapping his head back to the creature, to find that it had completely disappeared. Whatever it was definitely no normal creature. This thing could jump up and down 11 to 13 feet. It could jump onto a trailer without even hesitating, with no ladder or breaking its legs. This is something that a normal human just simply could not do. I'm not honestly sure if this story is true or not, but I thought you'd like to hear it. Skinwalkers are not some mystical fantasy creatures. No, actually, they're evil witches who like to cause pain and misfortune on others, and who may even cause death. In order to get their powers, they have to sacrifice someone they most love. The more they sacrifice, the more powers they get. This is an old story that happened in the 40s or the 50s, about a man who lived alone with his sheep and his dog in the middle of nowhere in his hogan. For weeks, he heard and saw strange things happening around him. He saw a black shadow running, knocking on his house. He heard a man's cough, and his sheep missing, and later found dead and mutilated. Until he found his dog dead. Tired and afraid of all of this, he went to a medicine man. He told the medicine man what he was experiencing. He blessed the man and told him to cover himself with ash and leave no part uncovered, and to sit outside his house with a rifle and to wait for it to come. When he sees it, he'll know that it's that thing, and to take the shot so it will leave you alone. The man did as asked. He waited in the dark long before he heard it. Something was coming towards his house. When he looked to his left, he saw a dog or a coyote. He knew it then for what it was. He slowly raised the rifle and aimed it at the dog creature and shot at it. The scary part was when the bullet hit it, instead of a dog cry, the creature let out a scream of a man who just got shot. The dog creature immediately turned and ran away. After that, the man never saw or experienced any strange happenings again. He even got a new dog. He fought with a skinwalker and won. Thanks for listening to these creepy, allegedly true Skinwalker encounters. That was a very fun live stream, and we even broke some records there. We had nearly 800 live viewers, and so many people shared stories. My goal is to try to do those live streams once a week, on Friday, at 9 or 10 p.m. Eastern. So definitely turn on notifications to not miss that. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. If you have a story that you would like to share in a future video, whether it's a Skinwalker story or something else, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would be honored to share your story with everyone here in the swamp, as stories like yours to help keep this show going. I'd like to know also down in the comments, which one of these stories was your favorite tonight? I don't know if I can pick one. I'd say all of these ones had their own little twist to it. Thank you guys, as always, for supporting the swamp the way you do. If you're unaware, you can download your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories from iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and pretty much everywhere else you listen to podcasts online. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.